Hey, y'all, welcome back. Today we got Brandon Barlow on the podcast. Brandon's a whitetail hunter from the hills of North Carolina, just a little bit north of me, and has an interesting take on the way that he approaches whitetail hunting. If you've ever heard of the 70 rule, that's Brandon. If you've never heard of the 70 rule, then this is a podcast you're going to want to listen to. Brandon collects fawning data. He uses that data over the course of several years to continue to dial in and utilize that information to target specific bucks during the early season, transitional season, and the rut. He has gotten it to the point where he kills the majority of bucks in 1 to 3 sits. And there's no way I can explain it. The only way you can understand it is to listen to it. But the facts speak for themselves, and he's highly successful with the way he utilizes it. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. As always, I appreciate you being here. I know you've got time that you could spend somewhere else, and the fact that you're spending it listening to this is important to me. If you have time and you're over on Apple or Spotify, please give me a rating and drop a quick comment. If you're on Instagram, give me a like. If you're watching this over on YouTube, share this with people that might like it and subscribe. As always, I appreciate y'all being here. Enjoy the podcast with Brandon. Have a great day. What's up, brother? Welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you jumping on, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I know I heard you. Now, I followed you on Instagram for a while, but I heard you on Clint's podcast. And then you were talking about this thing called the 70 rule, which we're going to get into. But I know that, when we were talking offline, one of the things that I think is important is to establish a few kind of few preliminary facts, concepts, so that when you get into that, it makes sense to people listening. So why don't you do the intro on that and just talk about some of the things that we need to kind of understand before we even start talking about what that is?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So I guess the best place to start that conversation is everybody runs trail cameras and everybody loves big pictures of bucks.
That is true.
So what you heard me talking about previously was the 70 rule, which is a rule that I came up with back in the early 2000s. And it's a way that I put a date to the deer sign that I'm seeing in the woods. And basically it's not complicated, and we can get into that today. But essentially, talking about establishing a few facts. And one of those facts is that all does don't come hot at the same time. Spring fawns, summer fawns, we've all seen it. Maybe in the northern areas, you have a little tighter rut than in the south, but it's ludicrous to think that all does come hot at the same exact time and that bucks can just be everywhere at once. That's not how it works. And we can talk a little bit about buck and buck travel and how they prioritize, but essentially you and I can sit here today and we can look at some fawning data and some doe information from trail cameras. And we're talking about how everybody likes big buck pictures. We can sit here today and we can guess when you'll get those pictures with an extremely high success rate. And so if you can anticipate or guess when you'll get your big buck pictures, you're having a lot higher odds hunting than you used to have. And so the 70 rule is a way for you to just simply walk in the woods around September 1st and be able to put a timing to everything that you're seeing.
So that basically, because I think what you're, at least having listened to you and what you're going to talk about today, you've dialed it down a lot more past, the way I think people talk about this in general, even though they're not saying the same, they are saying the same thing as primary rut, secondary rut, right? It's essentially they're talking about the breeding cycles of honestly different doe groups, right? In an area they may be hunting, and they're attaching dates to it as opposed to attaching, an estrus cycle to it, which I think as you're going to talk about, that's something that can become actually a lot more predictable if you know how to gauge that.
Yeah, the purpose of the 70 rule was never to be able to guess when you're going to get your big buck pictures. That's just a byproduct. It's a fun side effect. I love to be able to, work with guys and tell them like that's going to be a 1031 big buck spot. And then they hit me up and they're like, dude, I got big bucks, cruising 1025, 11.2, you were right. That's just a byproduct. I mean, that's not why we're doing this. We're in this to kill deer, not like get pictures of them, right? But if you can guess when you're going to get your big buck pictures, that's a good starting point to setting up a high odds hunt. And there's other things you have to do from there to say, dial it into just a couple of days. I mean, so why are we talking about this? And it's funny because the other day, someone said to me, they're like, "Oh, you're the fawn guy. You're the fawn guy." And I was like, "I'm not the fawn guy." And he's like, "No, no, you're the fawn guy." And I said, "I'm not the fawn guy." I said, "I'm the one sick guy, dude. Like, I have killed so many deer on the first sit." And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn, but the guys that have followed me for a while know I fill a lot of tags and I do it in short order. You don't have to sit 10 times to fill a buck tag. And if you're doing that, you're just hunting a little bit wrong. You're not out of skew far, but there's a way to do it a little bit more efficiently. And that's what I'm telling, like the message I'm trying to get out to people.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that really resonated with me when I was listening to some of the stuff you're talking about, because there's so many of us. I mean, obviously a lot of these guys who have podcasts and are on YouTube and whatever, like they're doing that for a living. They can be out in the woods constantly, but the majority of us have jobs, have families. And if we can do a much better job of understanding what's going on in the area we're hunting, like you said, and have high odd sits as opposed to just putting a bunch of time in the stand, and hoping that, okay, if I put in enough time, eventually, the buck I want to shoot is going to walk by me, then you're putting yourself in a much better position strategically. So take the next step and start talking about, okay, what is the 70 rule, and, how does that work? How do people utilize that?
Sure. So let me explain what it is, and then we can just talk real quick about how to implement it, because it's super easy. I came up with it, so it's got to be easy, right? Like, so, but essentially the 70 rule is a way that I take the deer sign that I'm seeing and I put a date to it. So the spring conversation really starts in the fall. So let's say you're out around September 1st, like everybody does. Maybe you're just getting some stands preset. Maybe you're hanging your cameras. Maybe you're a super slacker and you're literally just out for the first time. Either way, it's around that September time frame where you want to use the 70 rule. And so you're in the woods and you find a doe and a fawn track. So we're going back to one of the facts we established right out of the gate, which is all deer are not impregnated at the same time. So just to be dumb about it, different size fawns have different feet. I mean, if you have a fawn that's a month old, it's not going to have the same hoof size as a fawn that's 3 months old, right? Like bigger fawn, bigger foot. I mean, it's older fawn, bigger foot, right? So when you're out around that September 1st time frame, you can find, if you look, you can find does that have varying sized fawns. And why do we care about that? Because if you use the 70 rule at that time of year, you can anticipate with high certainty when you will get your big buck picture. So the first part of the 70 rule is track size. It's measuring tracks. It's the lowest hanging fruit. You go out in September, you find a fawn track, and let's say the mom has a 2-inch wide track and the fawn has a 1-inch wide track. It's about 50%. That's not what we're talking about here. The first part of the 70 rule is that fawn must have a track size that's 70% the size of mom's. So if she has a 2-inch track, that fawn will have like an 1.5-inch wide track. That is what I call a mature fawn. It will be visually bigger than the rest. I mean, it's a monster fawn. I mean, you'll see the other fawns, like I mentioned, with that 50% size track. That'll be like a typical rut spot, maybe a July fawn. That track's about 50% of mom's, 1 inch. That's going to be like a rut spot. That's going to be 90% of your fawns in northern states. Down here in the South, about 1 in 3 deer, you'll have that, typical rut timing. But you're going to see a lot of deer that have big fawns down in the South, and you'll find a few up north. And when you find a fawn around 9-1 that has a track that's 70% as big as mom's, that means that doe was impregnated early. That doe had that fawn most likely at least 90 days ago, born in April or May. Or sooner if you're in the South like me, sometimes even April. This year I found a fawn track in March. And so while you never want to base your entire hunting season on one deer, one fawn track, you want to go into that doe group and confirm it, because all the deer in the doe group will have fawns within a close time frame of each other. So if you go in, you find some other tracks around you found a doe group that's breeding at a certain time, and you're able to use the 70 rule to determine that that's an early fawn. It's 9-1, huge fawn track. That doe was impregnated earlier. You went in, you found other ones, you confirmed it, you hang a trail camera there, you're going to get your big buck pictures there in that October 1st time frame. It always works out. You hang a trail camera there, and you're going to get big bucks, say, in November on that 1-inch wide fawn track, because that doe was impregnated probably more like 11, 12. She had a July fawn. That's when you're going to get your big buck pictures. Maybe here in the South, like me, I had an August fawn drop, and it was like the whole group of does dropping them July 31st on. Well, I had all my big buck pictures there the last week of January, and it was a nonstop buck train. So it lines up, it works, and you can use my 70 rule on track size. That's the first part of it. Everybody can do it. You just need to carry a tape measure.
So you keep a tape measure in your pocket, actually, then?
I do, yeah. Whenever I'm in the woods, I do, because, I mean, less so now as I used to. I use it more as a prop, and I tell people to keep it in their pocket because I've done this so much now. I can really look at fawns and know. I mean, like my thumbnail's exactly an inch. So, I mean, if I see a 1 inch, I can look at a fawn on the fly or a fawn track and tell. But to carry the tape, usually I'm looking for browse damage. That's a separate conversation, but you can measure tracks, and you can get an idea for the age of your fawns around 9-1. Tiny track, recently born, huge track, old ass fawn. It's not that complicated.
All right. So knowing that, then how does that impact now the way you're hunting that animal? If you've got, because what the gestation period is, around 200 days? Talk a little bit about that so that people can kind of understand the math of, okay, why does it matter when they were born?
If we could just skip the gestation period for a second. So because for this conversation, it's really not important with this part of the 70 rule, because you're not really caring about the total age of the fawn. You're just caring that you have one that was born long enough ago to make a huge footprint. And you've got several. I mean, the 70 rule is all about repeatability and layers of confirmation. The first part of the 70 rule is track size. And again, you're just looking for some fawns that have huge tracks so that you can go out and do a second visual confirmation. So the second part of the 70 rule is visual. And we'll talk about the whole gestation period in 1 second. But just for this top point of the topic, it just doesn't matter. You're just looking for an old fawn with a huge foot. Visually, that same fawn. So let's say you find that fawn with a huge footprint, and you go out there and you're parked on the side of the highway glassing. What are you expecting to see? So this spot with the huge fawn tracks is going to have fawns that are visually bigger than the rest, but they're also going to be losing 70% of their spots around 9-1. So I know you've seen them, the fawns that are like half speckled, and they're huge. As fawns get to that 90 to 100 day time frame, they start to lose their spots. And so you're talking, okay, 9-1-ish, 9-15-ish. So if you have a July fawn, that 1-inch track, that 60-day-old fawn has all of his spots. That's not what we're talking about. Your rut fawn spot is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the huge track. That fawn will have most of its spots missing now. It's almost completely mature. By 10-1, it's going to be really hard to tell from its mom. I mean, like, the light's going to have to just hit it right. You're going to only see like one speckle. And that's a mature fawn. That fawn you will be able to visually tell. And I always like to joke and ask guys, like, if you go out to Kentucky or Kansas and you're on a road hunt and you're glassing, what are you looking for? Because everybody's out there glassing for bucks.
Yeah, I was just about to say they're looking for bucks.
Everybody does that, and it's crazy because you're in Kentucky or you're in Kansas, there's bucks. I'm going to be out there glassing for giant fawns because that's where I want to bow hunt around that time frame, 9-1, 10-1. I want to find a doe. So you're going to go out and find a buck, maybe, but you also might be hunting in an area that's just you're not going to have any action. And so for me, with the way that I've ran over 100 cameras now for 13 seasons, 119 cameras, and I've got thousands of videos that prove that if you can figure out when your fawns are being born, you can guess when you'll get the majority of your big buck pictures. And so you can do it with a tape measure, you can do it with your eyeballs on the side of the road. And the final part, which is one you don't get to measure, but it's just a fact, which is around that 9/1 time frame. If you find a fawn or a group of fawns with big feet, they're missing most of their spots. Those deer now weigh about 70 pounds. So you can see here in the South where we have 90-pound does, a 70-pound fawn is going to be hard to tell. But those deer are about 70 pounds now. And later, those big fawns will actually estrus themselves. And that's a separate conversation. But for this part of the 70 rule, it's visual, it's measuring, and it's body weight, and anybody can do that. And so it just gives you an idea. And when guys take just that one little tidbit and they go out and they say 9/1, 50% track, I got an 11-15 buck picture. I mean, it works. I mean, if you go out and you find a huge fawn track, you're going to get a 10/1 buck picture and you're going to say it works. If you have a July 30th fawn and you get 12/1 buck pictures, you're going to say it works. I mean, it works. And so you can figure it out. And so, but back to the gestation period, I think a good rule of thumb is about 200 days. That's not what I go by. I have it a little more dialed in than that. And one thing I like to say is that a lot of things impact gestation period. So I think now a lot of resources have came out online where they put the 200-day thing out. And I do think that's a good rule of thumb where guys see a fawn and they count backwards 200 days and try to get an idea of when that deer was impregnated, right? And I think that can give you like a 1 month window. But if you actually take a tape measure and use the 70 rule, you will find that you really weren't right about that. I mean, it's hard to guess a fawn if you're not measuring tracks or if you're not out there September 1st. So just because you see a fawn on trail camera in June, and then you say, oh, I'm going to count back 200 days, that's not going to be reliable enough. If you want that 2-week window of when you should get to, when you'll want to hunt and when you'll get your big buck pictures, you really need to implement the 70 rule. You need to get the visual, you need to measure tracks, and the tape measure will tell you for sure. So if you go out and you see that trail camera picture of a fawn, just go measure a track real quick. It'll only take you 5 minutes, and then you know for sure.
All right, so you do that, right? Let's say it's September 1st. You find that track that's 70% the size. You validate it either with camera data or with live data. You look at their size. What do you do with that information? Like, how do you take that and go, okay, this means here's when I need to hunt. That, because essentially what you're doing is you're finding a doe or a doe group, right? And you're predicting when they're going to be in estrus, which essentially means that's when the buck's going to show up.
And then you hung a camera there and you said, holy shit, it worked.
So how do you determine you found it? Okay, I got that. I've got one that meets the criteria. What do I do with that information now? What does that mean for me in terms of the dates, that I'm trying to hunt that animals? So one of my favorite sayings is, if you're hunting hot sign, you're a day behind. And it's true. When I used to track, you got that in your tag on you.
I do, man. And I say it all the time because it's true, because I want guys to think about that. There's so many people out there that go in the woods and they hang and bang on hot sign. And while that can work, and I think it's effective during the rut, and when you're in places that have a hard rut, I think that you can get in travel corridors and you can find hot sign and you can fill a tag. But you're going to have to hunt like a hammer. You're not going to do what we're talking about, where you're talking about having a mature buck killed in 1 to 3 sits. It's not going to happen that way. And so, what we're talking about is going out using the 70 rule. You got a 2 to 3 week window of when you think you're going to get your big buck pictures. You hang a camera and you got them. My favorite saying is, if you're a day late, you're $1 short. Well, it's true, because a lot of times these bucks are only in these thickets for a couple of days. And by the time you get him on camera, 90% of the time, if you get him on camera, he's leaving. And then in addition to that, by the time you find rubs and scrapes, he's probably at the end of his stint there. And so I think a lot of guys do a lot of unnecessary sits. And while I get the whole like hunt like a hammer, hunt hot sign thing. It's really the reason I have that saying is because it's about changing the way you think. It's about anticipating your deer. It's about being there waiting for a buck that you have history with, and how you dial the 70 rule in from a couple of weeks to a couple of days is with historical data. And so I think a real life example is a good way to kind of paint that picture. But we were talking in the pregame show about like like someone's dad's farm, the 80 acre they hunt. Well, if you're asking me like, all right, dude, what's your plan? You're going to go in there and you're going to kill a mature buck on the first sit. How are you going to do it? The first season, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to use the 70 rule probably around September 1st. And I'm going to get an idea for when my does are becoming hot. It's only 80 acre farm. So there should only be 1, 2, maybe 3 doe groups. It depends on where you live. Up north, maybe 1. Figure out when they're hot. Hang a camera, and that's probably all I'm going to do for that season. I'm going to go in there, hang a couple of cameras, and what I'm going to try to do with those cameras on season 1, I'm not going to hunt. I'm going to try to, first of all, establish daytime and nighttime areas. And secondly, I'm just going to try to get those big buck pictures. So I want to confirm that the 70 rule was right and that I'm not hunting a fawn that's like a one-off. Maybe a doe didn't get bred, or she got hit by a car and never got bred, or you want to have layers of confirmation, multiple fawns, but you know that that's right. So I'm going to hang cameras there to get those big buck pictures, and it's going to work. It always does. So I get my big buck pictures that first year, and maybe I know a thing or two about daytime and nighttime spots on the farm. That's year 1.
Okay, so let's just say they meet the criteria on September the 1st, when, without historical data, because I know you're not going to be narrow it down to, a day or two, when are you anticipating that estrus cycle?
Yeah, so if you're going to find a fawn that's around 9-1 that has a huge track, the one we're kind of talking about, that's going to be a pre-Halloween spot or more, depending on where you live. You're in South Carolina, you're down here like me. So I found a March track. I guarantee that spot's going to get September big bucks. A lot of my like mid to late April spots, I'm getting, 925 to 1012 hammers. And then when you get into like May fawns is where you start to really get like your pre-Halloween bucks. And then really as you get into June, you're kind of pushing into that November hunting. So down here in the South, we can have it just depends on how big your fawn track is, right? Like, and when they're being born. And there's a way to run trail cameras and get more fawning data. But really, I found that March fawn track just walking around the woods. I had a sneaking suspicion. I knew the does were early. I didn't know how early. Went out in March to collect some sticks and stuff that were in trees, and I found a fawn track. And so sometimes it's just looking down. But so year 1, I'm trying to make sure my big buck pictures line up with the 70 rule, and it always does. And then I'm trying to establish the daytime and nighttime areas, because everything I talk about is daytime deer only. I don't talk much at all about nighttime deer. It's not reliable. Deer kind of go out and explore at night, and they do excursions, and it's not repeatable. So Generally, if I'm speaking, it's about just daytime deer, and part of my first year attack is establishing those daytime areas. If I have any daytime areas.
Yeah.
If I don't have any daytime areas, I'm not hunting Dad's farm.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Okay, you see that track. How do you know that is, an area that they're in during the day versus something, just a travel area at night? So you're based in the beginning, the first year, you don't know that is what you're saying, is you got to.
Well, I do now. To someone who might not, a novice, they're just going to kind of hang cameras however they like to do it, in the prettiest place or in a trap line or whatever they do, right? They're just going to stick some cameras, maybe like my sister, just on a trail. Like they're just going to stick some cameras on. They're going to get some data. They might be night bucks. Okay, well, don't hunt there. But essentially for me, like I'm going to go in there and I'm going to hang my cameras where I think it's daytime bedding. And so my strategy is always to look for high stem count. I'm looking for browse damage and droppings to indicate that it's a daytime spot. So, I'm not really looking to hang cameras in open hardwoods and on food sources and things like that.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about like the browsing and that kind of stuff. How are you get a little bit more in detail in terms of identification of bedding areas as you start to figure out, strategize where you're going to place cameras?
so the year one strategy, let's say we come out of year one and we're going into year two, it's springtime. We're not even going to go out and look for fawns because we already did the 70 rule. We figured, let's say we figured it was a 10-20 spot. We had like some maybe 520 fawns or whatever the math. I do 196 days. It's close enough to 200. So, let's say you're out there, you don't even check for fawn tracks because you used the 70 rule the previous fall. Your big buck pictures lined up. There's no point in doing anything further. So year two, what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm building mock scrapes. And I'm going to do it in the bedding areas, like I said. And I'm probably going to run a few to see because the likelihood, no matter how good you are, you're likely going to run a mock scrape that doesn't become community, and that's going to happen. So on an 80-acre farm, I'm probably going to build 3 or 4 scrapes, and I would expect like 2 of them to take off into full community scrapes. But for me to build a mock scrape, one of the things that I like to push is if I don't get 90% daytime pictures on my scrape, I will kill it. I will kill the camera, kill that scrape, and just move it because I'm not trying to get nighttime data. It's not repeatable. And so how you dial the 70 rule. So if we could just pause right there. So the people that are still following, they want to do this. They want to go out and they want to make a 2-week window for themselves. And they did that. They listened, they went out, they're going to measure fawn tracks and they're going to hang cameras and they're going to confirm. But they want to dial it in a little bit further. And how you do that is with historical data, like repeat daytime deer data. Like these does always do this here at this time, or this buck does this at this time. And you start to pay attention to that. I'm not saying you have to journal it, but you start to pay attention to it. And so essentially you already know you got your big buck pictures. You had a couple nice ones come through. The 70 approved the 70 rule. Well, what now? So now you need to really pay attention to when did you get those buck pictures. And if they're daytime pictures, that's going to be a lot better data than nighttime pictures. I find that bucks run all over the place at night, and it's not uncommon for me to get nighttime pictures of a deer that I know that I'm tracking. I generally only hunt specific bucks, and it won't be uncommon for me to get a picture of that deer like 3 miles away at night. They run all over crazy. So you really can't use nighttime pictures. Like it should be between 5 a.m. and like 9 p.m. But that's the kind of data that you want to start paying attention to in those daytime spots.
Yeah, I think that's an important point because
and then you'll see the pattern, right? Like it's always Halloween when I get my big bucks. Now it's year 2. It did it again. I wasn't there hunting, but it happened. But now maybe you've seen some tail cupping. Maybe you had a big boy come in, smash the scrape. Maybe you have a hot scrape that turns off, right? Like right before standing estrus, my scrapes turn off. So it could be something simple like your scrapes turned off right there at 10:25. Maybe you had a doe tail cupping. Body language is a big one. Like I would urge people to learn body language on deer. Maybe you had a big buck, come through and he was tail cupping, rub urinating in the scrape versus near the scrape. Things like that can tell tales. And so now that you've got 2 years worth of data, you need to pay a little more attention to just, I got my big buck around Halloween. Like, well, tell me more. Like, was it 10/27? Did you get 3 of them on one day and maybe not on other days? Or, is there anything out of the normal there? Did you see body language? Did you have scrapes that turned off? All of this matters because when you start to take that type of historical data and you layer that on top of what you already now have a 2-week window, that's how you're going to get your like 5-day high odds hunt. What I consider a high odds hunt, 5 days guaranteed encounter. That's how you get that, is with that historical data. And so the earliest I like to hunt a spot is year 3. So I'm going to go into Dad's farm on year 3 with everything we just talked about, those pictures, the tail cupping, the scrapes turning off, 2 years worth of buck pictures, the 70 rules, old news now. Now I'm just a historical data hound, and I'm really looking at that. And I'm pretty confident I've got it down to about 5 days. And while I may not kill my buck, I often kill another one. It works. So that's when those deer do it. And so what I will say though is not all deer are repeatable, not all bucks are repeatable. Only about half of the bucks I find down here in the South repeat year to year, but those spots are repeatable. So even if you get a big hammer and he doesn't come back, you're just going to get a different one. I mean, those deer are hot, and those big bucks are where they need to be to procreate, and that's how they do it. They're efficient.
Hey guys, big thanks to Osseo Gear for supporting the show. Osseo is built specifically for bow hunters. Every stitch, zipper, and fabric choice is made to perform when it's quiet and the pressure's on. Their camo patterns are inspired by nature's predators, and they're purpose-built to ensure you blend naturally into the specific environment you are hunting. Make sure to use the code DONOTGO20 to get 20% off on your purchases at OsseoGear.com. Osseo is made for bow hunters by bow hunters. So give them a check. They're a big supporter of the podcast, and we appreciate them. Great gear. So in year one, you just said you don't hunt a spot until year 3, but the average Joe is not going to stay out of Grandpa's farm, Grandpa's 80 acres till year 3.
The average Joe's not doing 1-sit kills either. I mean,
right.
Do you want to have a high odds hunt? You've got to set it up. I mean, you got to set it up. It takes years to set up a fake hunt. Like for people, it's going to take work to set up a real high odds sit on public land, but it's possible and it's not hard.
So what do you tell? Are you telling the guy who's going out, let's say, Joe Blow hears this, he's like, I'm going to try that this season. Are you saying don't hunt that spot at all in the first year?
Yeah. What I'm saying is continue what you're doing. Keep doing it the way you're doing it. Because you're doing it for a reason, right? Either that's what you were taught how to do, or you had some success once or twice. Or maybe you're just like one of these rut guys that, has a big Instagram page and you always kill a 200, but it takes you 38 sits to do it and you'd like to do it in 8 sits. I mean, whatever your skill level is, right? I mean, keep doing what you're doing. But what I'm saying is maybe you want to branch out into a new spot, slow roll the new spot, collect a little bit of data, and listen to what we're talking about today with the 70 rule. When you get to the new spot, go out there around 9/1, see what's going on with the fawns, make a mental note with your tape measure of when you think you'll get your big buck pictures in that area, hang a camera. That's when you'll get the majority of them. And then from there, the following year, you can move into those daytime areas and start looking for repeatability. And then on the third year, even if you don't have a repeating buck, you've probably grown like a spike horn now into a 3-year-old by accident. And 2, you're hunting a very high odds thicket at a very hot time. And so you don't know who's going to cruise through. I mean, I've killed countless studs hunting a monster that never came. I just killed a different one. And so if you're at the right place at the right time, a lot of guys are always focused on two things that guys focus on. I think it's silly. One, and it's not completely silly because I get it. Like gear is one of them. I think guys think too hard about gear. It really doesn't matter. If you don't have a day walker, it doesn't matter.
It's because guys it's because we're like big kids.
I'm the same way.
We just like gear, right? So it's like I can learn a lot about that, and it doesn't mean I'm going to.
My shop, I got muddy sticks and I got all kinds of stuff. But I'm the same way. But like at the same time, most of the big bucks I kill, I don't use fancy gear. I mean, literally, like if you don't have a day walking mature buck on repeat, that's the last part of this whole thing. So
how would you define repeat? 2 days?
There's a difference between a 1-sit kill and a high odds sit. Mm-hmm. And I haven't really gotten, I'm slow rolling the 70 rule, man. I haven't really got, but since we're in this and you're gracious enough to give me a platform, I mean, so how you go from say a 5-day sit to a 1-day sit is with repeatability. It's the only way to do it. So let's say you take the 70 rule, real fast recap. You've got it down to 2 weeks. Awesome. Now you've went in there and you did 2 years worth of trail cameras. You got some historical data and you've got a 5-day window. Awesome. That's awesome, dude. Go back in there every year and kill a hammer. You're only going to have to hunt 5 times to kill one. I mean, probably, right? Like set up several of those spots now. I've got 49 mock scrapes on 49 different places. Set them up all over the place and just go take your deer when you want them, right? Well, okay. But if you want to have a 1-sit kill, That's different. That's repeatability. You need a buck that has done that at least 2 seasons in a row, if not three. So the Magnolia buck, I hunted him. I killed him on the fourth year I was hunting him. That was the 167 I killed this year. That was the fourth year I was hunting that deer. And so you need the repeatability to have a one sit kill. If you want to have one sit kills repeatedly, then you need to hunt bucks that you have a history with and they repeat. So the Magnolia buck, I could count on him. He always came around the same time. He did that 4 years in a row. This year I'm hunting like 6 mature bucks that are all doing the same thing. I'm hoping to have a good year. But the point is I have a lot of history. I've got 5-year history with 2 of these deer I'm hunting this year. And so, because work got me last year. But the point is like how you get that from 5 days to 1 day is with a buck that repeats himself. It's the only way. It's the only way to do it. And if you implement the 70 rule and you track historical data, what you'll have is some byproducts of that. One, you will inevitably grow a spike horn into a shooter. It happens. I do it all the time. Like all my bucks pretty much were either I know that they were like spikes I grew up or they probably were, right? Like, so that will happen. But the other byproduct is you're gonna find that a percentage of your bucks do repeat that behavior, like the Magnolia buck I killed this year, and he will come back at the same exact time and he will smash the same scrape and he will try to breed those same does. And that is the rarest of all unicorns. And when you do the 70 rule and you implement the historical data and you get your 5-day window, and then you have a Magnolia buck who has now done that like 2, 3, 4 times, that is a very, very, very high odds sit if you sit all day from like before sunup till way after dark. Like you just get in early and you leave late, you don't bust deer, you're going to have an encounter with that guy. And so, you don't want to go walking through your bedding areas at 6:30 in the morning when it's gray light. But, if you're in there when those deer come back from ag, you're going to have a great day.
So the first guy that sees this and says, hey, I'm going to try that this year, what happens if he gets his 2-week window, finds a fawn that meets the 70 rule, he kind of through deduction, okay, here's my 2-week window, goes in and hunts it, right? Basically, I got 2 weeks, I'm going to take a shot in the dark and I'm going to go out there, most of the time. Is that going to blow that spot up? Does it do anything negative versus just collecting data in year one? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
So I think that your expectation should meet your effort, right? I think that there's a correlation between your expectations and the effort you're going to put forth. So the 70 rule I came up with back in the 2000s before I had a lot of other deer skills, a lot of other things that I've used to dial this in. And there's another trick I use to get that down to a day. I can tell you in a second, not just the repeatability of it. Also, you need to find that deer's REM cycle bed. But what you're saying is, if you use the 70 rule like I used to when I first invented it, and you just hunt like a hammer like I did because I didn't know any better, I killed bucks. If you use the 70 rule and you get a 2-week window and you hunt like a hammer, you're going to be in the money. I just don't want to do 8 sits to kill a deer. I'm over it. And so I'm 46. I like to kill them in a couple of sits, and I like to hunt specific bucks here in the South, at least in North Carolina, Piedmont, where I live. It's shit, man. It's pine forest. And so you can spot like counties and not find a 150. And so like, it's horrible. And so like you really need to find big deer in areas that are growing big deer, and there's reasons they're growing big deer, but you need to find those pockets that have the genetics and the resources and the nutrition. And then you need to use the 70 rule in those spots and hunt like a hammer, and you'll kill a nice buck all the time. But if you really, really want to, and I think to some extent, a lot of the guys that are killing monsters and they're hunting like a hammer, that's what they're doing, right? I mean, they might not be using the 70 rule, but they might say, oh, I always see a big buck on that ridge at, the last week of October, and that's where they hunt, and they always kill one hunting like a hammer using signs that they've seen, like historical. And so I think other guys are doing it to some extent. But if you use the 70 rule and hunt like a hammer, I mean, you'll get it done. The question is, do you have like 7 buck tags and like 10 days to hunt? Because if you have a lot of tags and a little time, you're going to want to try to do 1 sit kills and 2, 3, 4 sit kills. You're not going to be able to do 10 sits when you've got several buck tags. I mean, like you get 5 buck tags.
Yeah.
And rifle opens in August for you.
I was going to say, in South Carolina, rifle opens the exact same day that bow season opens. There's actually no difference. They run concurrently the entire season.
Don't you love when the Michigan guys talk about super pressure and it's like, dude, you got no idea what pressure is.
I know, that's funny. It's like, I hear that all the time, and no one hunts down south from up north because the deer are a lot smaller, so they have no idea. But it's like, try hunting deer that get shot at from day one with a bow and never have a break. They're getting shot at for literally 5 straight months.
Yeah, all the deer I kill, all the big bucks I kill, always have bullets or broadheads or whatever in them. I mean, the Magnolia buck this year had old buckshot in his ass, all like cysted around it. Like
those big ones are tougher than freaking hell, man.
Yeah, but even does, a lot of the does I shoot have broadheads and stuff in them. It's like guys are just whacking deer, man. Like down here, it's crazy. But yeah,
so you were talking about
we do have big deer if you go out and do the legwork, and that's part of why I run so many cameras.
Yeah.
I don't think if I was in like South Dakota, I would have to run 100 cameras, man.
No, and if you're in South, the middle of Illinois or Missouri or something, you wouldn't be running 100 cameras.
But my thing is like I will have a panic attack if I don't go into the hunting season with at least 5 to 10 day walking mature bucks that I have multiple years history with. Like I know they come back. If I am resorted to like just hunting a hot spot because I identified it during this, like maybe I use the 7 rule. I know it's hot. They always come at the time, but I don't have it dialed in on a specific deer, I'll have a panic attack. I don't like that. I can't stand just hunting like a hammer, even though I know I'll see a lot of deer and I'll probably get it done. I can't stand. So for me, I run a lot of cameras because of where we live and because I have to go into the season with at least really like a dozen day walking mature bucks, what I call day walkers. Really, I need a dozen of them to have a warm fuzzy because that's what it takes for me to kill 1 or 2, man. Like I jack it up a lot. Like I'm a terrible hunter. I just know how to get on them. I just can't kill them.
Well, as many cameras as you're running, like how much, like how many miles is that? Like what's the range that you got cameras hanging in? Because if you're hunting, this is all public, right?
Yeah, I got it's about 200 miles between my 2 furthest cameras.
Dang, that's a lot of freaking space.
Well, but I got 4 cameras in Virginia, which is only like 50 minutes up the road.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got 2 cameras just over the line in South Carolina and Dornoch. And then I've got everything in between, and I mean I've got over 40 just at the Uwahari. So
nice. Talk a little bit about, because you mentioned mock scrapes quite a bit. How do you build a mock scrape? Because I mean I've heard 9,000 different ways to do it, and everyone's convicted about that their way is the best way. How do you build a mock scrape?
Yeah, so for me, mock scrape for me is not a place that I'm looking to just get deer pictures. During that October time frame, I swear if you just took a dirty sock and sprayed WD-40 on it, you'd get a big buck to make love to it. Like they're feeling sexy, they love it, but that's not what I'm all about, right? Like, so I'm trying to actually use scrapes to collect real-time data and not contaminated data. And so when I'm building a mock scrape, there's some rules for me. There has to be security cover on all 4 sides. And if it's so when I build a mock scrape for the first time, I'm going into one of these spots. So let's say one of the things I like to say is like when I ask guys like where are you hunting? And like in my case, let's say the Uwahari. Okay, well I'm hunting this 60,000 acres over here. It's like, well, no, you're not, dude. Like I'm actually hunting like 80-acre pine thicket over there, and I'm hunting like a 40-acre cedar thicket over there, and like I'm hunting these primary bedding areas inside that big piece. And so I think that's important to just kind of establish. So like when I'm running a scrape, I'm running it inside one of these primary bedding areas. So I'm not running a mock scrape at the Uwahari 60,000 acres. I'm running a mock scrape in that 40-acre cedar swamp over there because it's a daytime spot. And so I've already confirmed that. And so I'm going to build a mock scrape in a spot that I will only get daytime scrape activity. Again, if it gets night pics, I'll kill it. Like 90% daytime pictures only. And then I'll build a scrape there. So if you find, my favorite spot to build a scrape is a natural four corners inside that primary bedding area. It's the perfect place to hang a vine. You don't need to add anything to it. If you hang a clean vine there, that's not all your shit on it. If you hang a clean vine there, the deer will naturally bump their head on it and they will start to use that vine naturally. You can hang a camera there, it will work. I think it's probably okay to start it with something. You could hang a vine there that already has deer scent on it, or you could maybe very lightly give it a little something, but it's not required. And here's why. When you start adding scent or lure to a scrape, you start pulling deer unnaturally. And so while maybe you have a buck that typically skirts that bedding area, if he smells that, he might come right through there. And so you're going to write that down. Oh man, 10, 20, I got my buck. But actually, like, you were like 80 yards off, and that's not going to be repeatable. And so you're going to go back and hunt that scrape, and you're not going to see them. And so you really, to get to that, we're talking about this because the whole point is, how do I get to a one sit kill on a monster? And to do that, you need the repeatability. And to get the repeatability, you can't be pouring out corn. You can't be pouring out minerals. You can't be squirting and slathering stuff on a rope, because you're going to lure deer. And when you lure deer, it's not going to have the same natural repeatability that it would have if you built that scrape at a natural four corners and a big buck came through and hit his head on it and said, "Oh, hey, what's that?" And it's all natural. That's because you found a place where a big buck travels, right? Like, you didn't do anything special there. And so the point is you're trying to find these deer. You're not trying to pull these deer. If you're pulling deer, it's not going to be repeatable. If you're finding deer, it almost always is repeatable.
You're going to throw a lot of people for a tizzy with that one. Can you bait in North Carolina?
You can bait.
Yeah, you can bait. A lot of people bait in South Carolina too.
And that's a big problem for two reasons. Because one, when you're baiting, you're attracting a nighttime food destination. I mean, you need to be really careful when you're baiting deer, because you're just going to create a nighttime destination. And we can't hunt at night, right? Like, we have to hunt during the day. And so if you've got a spot that could be daytime bedding and you start pouring corn in there, you're going to end up turning that spot into a nighttime spot. And so you just have to be careful with food. I mean, food can jack up a property. If you understand layered bedding and how bucks bed and they layer in behind other deer and stuff, when you start pouring food out, you can jack up a spot pretty quick. And so baiting is a double-edged sword, but we're talking about a high odds sit where you go in and take a buck and a sit or two. And to do that, you need that repeatability, and you can't pour bait out or use scent for that reason. And so here's the other thing that I like to ask guys. So we all know about scrape week, October, right? We love it. Big bucks are smashing scrapes. Here in the South, it's more like September 20th. It happens a little sooner, but we love scrape week or scrape month. And well, I like to ask guys, like, what do you think those bucks are there doing when they come to a scrape? Like, what kind of data are they collecting? Like, are they just there like messing around? Or, like I joke and say, are they there checking the refrigerator? No, they're there trying to figure out when those does are going to be hot, because bucks are not nomadic. They have a home range. So I find it's like 1,000 acres. It can vary. Maybe it's more in the big woods, but here it's like 1,000 acres. And so they're on their 1,000 acres and they're trying to figure out when the does are going to be hot and where they need to be, right? Because back to the whole, like, bucks can't teleport. So if they need to be a mile up the road, they're going to be a mile up the road. I mean, they're where they need to be. And so they're out hitting scrapes and they're trying to figure out when the does are going to be hot. So back to Dad's farm, you've already gone in there. Like, you know when those does are going to be hot, right? Like, you did the 70 rule. You've already have a year of pictures. Like, I know the week that my does are hot. Well, the next part of the ingredient is you want the big buck who's slipping through during scrape week. You want him to know when your does are hot, don't you? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, makes
if
sense.
he knows when they're hot and you know when they're hot, that's better odds for an encounter. So when you start pouring out interdigital and estrus urine and forehead gland and all of that, essentially you're not just making your data so that you just throw it away. Don't even write it down because you lured deer. It's not repeatable. And two, you've now jacked up his data. And what I find is that can create a randomness and like kind of a nomadity to that buck. It makes him harder to hunt and it results in more sits when you do that. You don't want to be luring or using scent on a big buck. It's better to find a buck, not pull a buck, because we're talking about repeatability to get to that one sit kill. It's the only way to do it.
You mentioned something earlier about REM cycle beds, which I heard you talk about with Clint.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to give Clint a little the good.
Let's dig into that a little bit, because I'm sure most people are like, what the hell? I mean, we know what a bed is, but what's a REM cycle bed?
So we've got it down now to a day or two, right? Like we've gone in, we got the 5-day window with some trail cameras, and maybe you're on year 3 now, and you have a buck that you identify with, and you say, man, that's Frank the buck, man, and this is his third, like the Magnolia buck. This is his third, fourth year here. I know he's going to come at this time. He's been doing it. It's guaranteed. It's guaranteed that you're 95% going to get a picture of that deer. Okay. Well, that doesn't mean you're going to kill that deer, right? Like, so, I mean, good luck with your picture, but like, you need to kill him now. And so I'm not a big one to talk about gear and talk about woodsmanship and tree selection. I mean, I trust everybody listening to this is a killer and can do all of those things. But with respect to the REM cycle bed, so, the majority of the big bucks I kill are either on a scrape or they are at their REM cycle bed. And when I say REM cycle bed, what I mean is big bucks need to sleep every day for 30 minutes. They have to turn the lights out. And a lot of people don't realize that. I don't think anybody's ever talked about it, but it's true. All terrestrial land mammals have to catch a REM cycle. And so when you hear guys talk about buck beds, I think it's important to think about that, because if you start thinking about secondary, temporary bedding, maybe on some soybeans, maybe you're talking about some primary bedding, but you're not talking about the REM cycle bed itself. And so what I find that is, usually, like with the Magnolia buck, he had a little 3-acre or so bubble that he was living in during the day. I would get daylight pictures of him all around in this one little spot a couple of days a week. He wasn't living there all the time. He likely had a couple of those spots, maybe 10 miles up the road, who knows, but he was using this one for years during this time, this one little part of an island. And so I would get daytime pictures of him in there. And so whenever I would go in there off season, I never knew where exactly I would bust him out of. I could bust him over there. I could bust him out of there. Or maybe I'd go in there and he wasn't anywhere. And then I was leaving and I'd bust him by the truck. It's like, where the hell are you, dude? Like, so primary beds, what I consider a primary bed is any of those beds in that bubble that he's using. He could be watching a parking lot. He could be, maybe the wind shifted, and so he's just kind of moving around. And so the Magnolia buck, the buck I killed this year, was using on the land I was hunting. I don't know about elsewhere. On the land that I was hunting, I witnessed him or seen him or have video of him using around 40 beds. Only maybe 6 to 10 of those beds were inside that daytime bubble. So I consider those primary beds. Daytime bed, primary bed, say it however you want to say it. But think of when you hear me say primary bed, I just mean daytime bed. I'm not talking about a bed over by the beans. I don't care about that bed, right? He's got thousands of those. Like, who cares? Like, we're talking about daytime beds, primary beds. He only had like 5 to 10 in that little bubble. You didn't know where you'd bust him out of. One of those beds was burnt to the dirt and it was inside of a hole, and he would either be there during real shit weather or sometimes he would just use it during the day. But you would see him when he was in the area, he would go in that bed to catch a REM cycle, and he would actually lay his chin on the ground and close his eyes, and he would catch his deal. And they don't do that everywhere, and they're not going to do that with ground scent from people, and they're not going to do that with ground scent from dogs. and bears and everything else, they're going to do that in a really sterile spot. And so that REM cycle bed is where I kill a lot of big bucks. And so when you add, let's so back to the one sit kill, like so. I didn't even kill the Magnolia buck. It took me 3 sits this year to kill him, and I had all this data. So it's one thing to talk trash; it's another thing to execute, right? So I didn't even do it. It took me 3 sits, but I had this all on him. I had the repeatability on him for 4 seasons. I had his REM cycle bed of where I knew he would go inevitably, and when he was in the area, and it still took me 3 days to kill him. And so it's not given, but if you can find that REM cycle bed, they're very vulnerable. And so when you add everything we talked about, but you add the repeatability, and then you add that finding that one of those REM cycle beds, one of those burnt to the dirt beds where he's sleeping, now you've got a really, 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 really high odds hunt. And if you're like me, it still takes 3 days, but you're in the money. And so, measuring browse damage is how I found that buck's REM cycle bed and that in his bedding area. I followed. It's pine needles in the south here, and so up north the guys get snow, and they don't realize it's a real blessing. You do, but they don't, and so. When you're trying to track deer in pine needles, it's tough. And so one thing I've learned to do is measure browse damage, and those bigger bucks will browse significantly higher than the rest of the deer. And so you can follow browse damage and find like a primary bedding area. And then within that primary bedding area, if it's a REM spot, you're really, that's how you work this from 5 days down to 3, down to 1. You got to inch in, you've got to find a bed, you've got to have repeatability, but anybody can do the 70 rule. Anybody can hunt like a hammer and be on the money, but dialing it in, you said average Joe, it's not average Joe work. I mean, it's, you've got to take it a little further.
Is there any way that you can utilize this on like an out-of-state hunt on property that you don't get to hunt every year, right? So it's okay. Let's say, Joe Schmo is gonna, hey, I've got a farm in Ohio, and it's not mine; it's a buddy of mine's. I get to hunt there every year, but the guy that usually goes with me isn't going. Do you want to come up and spend a week with me in Ohio, right? Walk through with that situation. Like, is there any way you can use it within the context of when, like, you haven't had a chance to scout, like you get up there and you're there from August 1st to August 7th or whatever? Is there any way you can use it once you're kind of further into the season, or does it really need to be something that you got the data earlier on to be able to utilize?
Well, so, I mean, now you're talking about just going out and hunting in the same season. And so I think that anything that we talked about today can be put in your woodsmanship pocket. I mean, I think it's good information. I mean, maybe you're out there and you're trying to do this on the fly. I mean, I think it's good information to know where your does are in the breeding process. And maybe it's not August, but maybe it's November, and maybe you're doing this and your deduction is that you're hunting over pregnant does. And so maybe that's not the best strategy. Maybe you need to go find like a funnel or a travel corridor. Or, part of what I like to talk about with scrapes is we talked about the daytime spot, and we talked about like, not using lure and trying to catch deer doing natural things. But one deduction that you can make right away is if you're hunting over does that have already been impregnated. And so maybe if you are, you're going to, maybe change your efforts to a food source or to a travel corridor or to something else. And we were talking about scrapes earlier with respect to like where I would build them, security cover and daytime spots. I'm not trying to lure deer. I want to collect really good data that's repeatable. Well, it's really important that on the fly, you're just kind of paying attention to everything that's happening out there and just making micro adjustments. I'm not the guy to give advice on hunting on the fly. Not the guy, like the buck rubs don't play into the 70 rule. I'm never hunting on the first year. So I think that for the most part, I mean, if you're out there using this in real time, you're just trying to get an assessment of like timing. Maybe it's the first year you went to Ohio and you're like, okay, well, when are these does on this property hot? And confirming, okay, yeah, they're probably not pregnant. I'm probably in the money, and you're gonna just do a hunt, and it's Ohio. Maybe you'll get lucky. I mean, it's not going to be any kind of high odds sit. I think it's the repeatability of everything that allows you to kind of key it in. But I would say if you're in Ohio, do the 70 rule, because if you're going to go back to that same property, don't you want to maybe next year pick a better date if you don't fill a tag? So do the 70 rule on the fly, leave a camera, just let it die, and then when you go back, you'll see your big buck pictures. Well, shit, man, maybe I should have went a week later.
Yeah,
well, now man.
So what other pieces of information? Like, obviously this is a system, like you said, it's a multi-year system. You can use it with a much broader window if you are able to assess things at the early part of September, but your goal is to basically continue to narrow the picture down over the course of about 3 years, give or take, so that you can really, like you said, have a high odds sit. Other than the things that you've talked about so far, is there anything we're missing that is a significant component of this?
Just go have fun with it, right? Like, so this year, play with it, pick a new spot. I don't care if it's the 5 acres behind grandma's house. It does not matter if it's behind Taco Bell. Do this anywhere, right? Go out and play with it. Go out and this year, do a little 70 rule. Just guess when you're going to get your big buck pictures. Just try it. But, you don't want to do this on one fawn. Remember, like, this is if you go behind Taco Bell, you want to find 3 or 4 fawns, right? But let's say you do that and you say, oh man, this is going to be like an 11 to 11:15 spot. Hang a camera this year, have fun with it, and see if it works. That's all I'm asking people to do. Just try that. And then when you get your big buck pictures, hit me up, because you now are saying, hey, dude, like, this works and I don't really want to sit 8 days. How do I do this in 3? And that is where you're going to need to start looking at, like, making more conscientious decisions about using lure, and making maybe a little bit of organization to your SD card management and note taking and stuff. I mean, you're not going to be able to go in half-ass and do it, right? But I say for the guys this year, just have fun. Take a tape measure, this and one trail camera, tape measure and one trail camera. Go do it, and then let me know when you get your big buck pictures, because you're not going to want to sit 8 days to kill them. You're going to want to do it in 2 or 3.
And I'm assuming with the amount of data you're trying to collect, that you're not running a lot of cell cameras, right? You're running probably a lot of SD cameras, just because of the battery life and what you need, how long you need it to be able to last without having to go in there and change batteries and stuff.
Yeah, I got a dozen or so of cell cameras that I run locally. And the reason I run them locally is for those reactionary hunts. I mean, I would be lying if I said there's times where, like, 30 minutes up the road, like a 130 shows up at 2 in the afternoon, and it's like, I'm going to just throw one sit at that in the morning, right? Like, that happens. I mean, so I have some cell cameras locally for reactionary hunting, like when a slob rolls in and maybe I don't have another play. This year I'm hunting 6 daywalkers in 5 weeks. So my October's burnt. I won't even look at those cell cameras, but let's say, who knows? Something could happen, flooding or something, and then I'm at a loss. So maybe those cell cameras, because they're local, a local joker could show up and give me a sit when I otherwise don't have one. But for the most part, the cell cameras are just for fun. They're for social media, they're just to show, like, hey, like, you don't need to add scent. You could still get deer smashing your scrapes, things like that. Like, it's just for fun. Yeah. But you shouldn't really use cell cameras if you're really looking to big buck hunt and do it efficiently in a couple of sits. Cell cameras are not what you want to do. There's too much work. You're going to be going in and out of there too much. They create a frequency. They're not the best, and they're expensive. And here's the other thing is, like, when you start spending real money on this, you can get upset and you can get emotionally, and like you can lose it. Like, you can get defeated. And when you start spending real money, you know how these cell camera companies are. They start hitting your checking account and you're like, oh shit, I forgot, and like, they'll eat you alive. And so when you start doing that and then you're not getting results, it's tough. So I think a lot of guys, what I would like to conclude with is, if I may, a lot of guys want to use the 70 rule, and they always, like, they're excited about it. And I'm grateful that they're even looking at my page. I am, and I'm grateful for you for having me on. But I think a lot of guys, they're excited about it, but the first thing they do is they send me a buck picture. And it's like, what do you think about this? And it's like, well, I mean, I think that's a buck. I mean, so if you have a buck picture with a date,
I think that's a buck.
that's good, but you really need to work this backwards. So, you really need to start with the tape measure. And then if you have buck pictures that, because what you've got is buck pictures that maybe you baited in, or maybe you use some dope on a rope, whatever it is. And so I would say just forget all that and grab the tape measure and hang a clean camera with no attractant and do it and see when you get your pictures. It'll line up,
Yeah, no, that's good advice. Are you like, do you post, I mean, I've looked at your Instagram, but it looks like there's more of this happening recently. Are you posting stuff on there that is kind of educational around the different components of this, just so that people can kind of stay on, oh, okay, I know this is an example of what he's talking about here. Like, is that something that people can track and follow with you? And if so, like, where do they find you?
So on Instagram, I mean, it's Instagram, man. Sometimes they're fast and dirty. Sometimes they're lengthy and they don't get any hits. I mean, with Instagram, the shorter and the stupider you make it, the more views it gets, right? Like, so if you try
YouTube's
posting,
the same way.
Yeah,
like
if you try posting how to change your brake pads on Instagram, you're not going to get any views. So
yeah.
There's a few of those out there. If you go to my profile on Instagram and just click the 70 rule, it'll take you through some videos like this in this format where I've just edited out the nuggets. If you want the full version, then I would tell guys to either re-listen to this again, but like really re-listen to it. Don't be driving and stuff, or any of the other podcasts I've done where we've dug into it. But also, there's a link on my YouTube or in my Instagram profile to my YouTube. While I don't recommend you troll around in there, it's trash. There is one video in there that takes you right to and a full explanation on the 70 rule. So check it out. But _Brandon_Barlow on Instagram. And I think if guys just dabble and have fun this year and just try to guess when you will get your big buck pictures, and you will crap when you start getting it right.
I love it. Thanks for being on here, brother. I appreciate it. Lots of really interesting information. I'm gonna have to literally go back and listen to this probably 2 or 3 times and break all this stuff down in my head. But it gives me a lot to look at when I start looking at my trail cameras, the stuff that it's coming out like I'm seeing now. And I think one of the biggest things that you said that I haven't heard a ton of other people say really is, I don't even pay attention to nighttime pictures, right? I mean, it's really easy for us, especially with cell cameras, to get like super excited because this, big 150, walked through this area that we're hunting at midnight. But I mean, that's not really telling us anything.
Well, it's not historical data. So
yeah.
If you really want to narrow this down, then you just need to only pay attention to the stuff that's going to be, daytime, repeatable daytime stuff.
Yeah, man. Thanks for jumping on, brother. I appreciate it. I can't wait to get this one out to everybody.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. See you, bud.